we're not an activated carbon,
Right.
we're more of a biomedia that can replace your ceramic bio blocks and do carbon things.
Right.
Wait, what? We were so intrigued we had to invite Brian to Wine Wednesday. Unfortunately, we had a few technical difficulties. Happy Wine Wednesday. Brian, welcome. The Wine Wednesday episode still holds valuable information, but Brian agreed to meet with us again to discuss the details about Aquachar. Welcome, Brian from Aquachar. And you actually started off as a hobbyist, right? So what led you to Aquachar?
So me personally, as a hobbyist, about 10 years ago, my favorite sailfin tang showed signs of whole and head lateral line disease. My competition Planet Tank showed nutrient deficiencies because I was making the mistake of thinking, carbon was the solution for water changes. You can throw some in, pull it out, do that type of thing. And so I changed out using carbon for hours and hours of husbandry, water changes, sifting the sand, getting organics out that way, manual removal, everything like that.
That is not how this works.
I met the inventor in happenstance at a local fish store. I've been doing Planet competition tanks for probably 15 years. I've done reef tanks for another 10 years. And I stopped by the store and I met this inventor, and he kind of presented the idea of he was making carbon as a biological media, so like a long-term use carbon. He had just moved back here from Africa where he invented it. He saw the water crisis firsthand over there, and he kind of wanted to find a solution, a long-term solution, because activated carbon's designed for, industrial use. Ship it to the site, get it back, ship it, and constant production. So what he wanted to do is have something that can be regenerated, can be used locally, produced locally, and didn't need the external fuel, the greenhouse gases, and everything like that.
Let's get the most important question out of the way. How does Aquachar compare to activated carbon?
Is it different, and how is it different?
Yeah, so one thing that's interesting is we integrated some of the ceramic biomedia technologies into the carbon. So instead of like a silicate-based ceramic block that's fired at a high degree in a kiln, we actually decided to go the opposite way. So we'd have carbon-based kind of a biomedia that's carbon-based. What that does is it basically allows the organics to be sucked down to the surface. But since it's a larger size here, I'll show you. You can see that this is a lot larger than a normal activated carbon. It has all levels of micro, macro, and mesoporosity. So what that allows is it allows for bacteria to take those organics and use it as a food source. So Aquachar ends up acting like kind of like an Uber Eats for your bacteria. Will pull in the organics, it will suck them in, and it allows the aerobic and anaerobic bacteria work on one site to do the like biogeochemistry chain of breaking down redox of different types of nutrients. So it ends up becoming a media that builds up, and it's meant to add new to the old and rinse off the old monthly. What that does is it kind of breaks up some of the existing biofilm and everything and lets it regenerate and jumpstart the new stuff as a biological media. So it's meant to be treated like live rock that you can rinse. Once a month in your water change, put it in a bucket, just shake it out, get some of the organics out, and put it back in your system. That allows the bacteria to regenerate to what your problems are for the next week, not what it's built up to for the last 6 weeks.
Makes sense.
So are the biological benefits the reason for the higher cost of Aquachar?
If we do the chemical filtration just as well as activated carbon, some say better. We have like reviews from customers that say my fish are flying, or I've used XYZ, whether it's with resins or mixed medias and stuff like that, chemical filtration, and I've never seen the 10K clarity that I've seen with Aquachar. So we do that for much longer, but then we turn into a biological media. So whereas activated carbon, you put some in, it's activated carbon that's used in the aquarium hobby, they've gotten a lot better at sourcing it, but it's all a mass industrial produced small portion of something that's meant for either like medical use or municipal use. It's not developed for aquariums, so it's meant to have a quick reaction of maybe, days when you're talking about or hours when you're talking about dialysis and pumping stomachs, or couple weeks when you're talking about municipal use where they have a regular maintenance schedule that's they're getting paid to do. So one of the things that's interesting with Aquachar is it's meant to last in your aquarium. So here, I'll show you an example actually. A little bit of comparison. So this is 25 gallons worth of Aquachar. So it's going to last 3 to 6 months. With activated carbon, like I said, you do 2 to 6 weeks or 2 to 3 weeks, and you throw it away. So I just want to show kind of like a comparison of how much activated carbon compared to Aquachar over the lifespan of Aquachar versus, what they recommend with activated carbon. So, this is 25 gallons. And then, after its lifespan, you'd throw it out, 2 to 4 weeks. And here's another one. And another one. A lot of times people don't understand with Aquachar, it's more of a long-term use. You get more of a lifespan out of it, plus you get the biological side. So each time, I poured the cup over here, you toss that out, throw it and go into the dump. This is meant to be used for a long term as a biological media and a chemical filtration. Add the new to the old and then recycle it. When you do the comparison between, routine maintenance and even regular maintenance, the cool thing about Aquachar is the only maintenance you got to do when you have to pull it, throw it away, and then redo it with activated carbon is with this, all you have to do is pull it out during your water change, shake it off in a bucket, break up some of the biofilm and the larger organics, and throw it back in your system, let it regenerate itself.
You're talking about reusing it like live rock, but isn't there an actual regeneration process too?
After that 3 to 6 months, we can use a mixture of water and hydrogen peroxide, 50-50 mix. You soak it for 12 to 24 hours. You can do a little bit longer. Then you just air dry it afterwards and shake it out, air dry it afterwards, and you're good to go. So it extends its lifespan as a biological media. It allows you to manage it. Like I said, it's meant to be treated like live rock you can rinse. So to be able to control your biological side of it and everything like that, when things get out of whack, you can break it down, let it reestablish itself. The carbon sucks in the organics and the food for it. And bacteria is lazy just like me. They only want to eat and reproduce. So we provide that internal perfection or the internal protection for them to be able to focus on that task and break down the organics that are delivered to it. So it helps you with kind of like a more on-demand consumption of those fine organics that build up in your water. And a lot of people see a lot better balance in their system.
After it's been regenerated with peroxide, is it then just going to work as the biological and no longer the chemical?
So actually, there is some reoxygenation that happens with it. So you do get some of that regeneration process from it. But a lot of it has to do, since the large size of it, sometimes early on you'll get those clogged porosities and stuff like that. So it's going to have diminishing effect if you're trying to get it from a clarity standpoint. We always, there's nothing better than that first fresh reaction of fresh Aquachar. That's why you kind of can figure out what your dosing is and how often that works for your system that you're happy with.
Let's talk about what that size and why Aquachar is so much bigger.
Some of these, like that looks like a log to me. And then, they're really quite big. You can see the grooves and you can see that it's porous.
Tell them how light it is. It feels, that's one of my favorite things at a show is I'll toss a little piece to somebody and they can, or I'll keep a bag like this and you expect this to be heavy. I throw it to somebody and you get an instant reaction from them.
I believe you that it's wood-based. It looks like wood.
So that's actually, it's funny you bring that up. So one of the things that we do, and I'll explain, we're not just trying to flip burnt wood on the hobbyists. There's a very specific chemistry in what we're doing. we're creating a very specific environment where we limit the oxygen and maximize the temperature. So one of the cool things is the reason activated carbon has so many issues is they're using coal basically most of them are using coal as a foundation product. And then they have to use external fuel to increase that temperature to be able to create activated charcoal.
Okay.
So by using that external fuel, if any industrialized process, they're going to be penny pitching, trying to find loopholes. That's why you hear about acid washing with carbon and stuff like that. A lot of that's to get rid of those pre-smoked tars that build up when you fire something. So with Aquachar, one thing that we do really different is, so we're a batch process. So, we make X amount each batch, kind of like, when you brew beer. But one of the key things is with our system, the machine, everything like that, is we try to maximize the time and temperature in this specific environment. So carbon can structure internally, force out impurities, and still make those carbon-carbon bonds that'll make it not disintegrate in your aquarium, which there's a lot of ceramic media that has a reputation for breaking down over time. And I as a hobbyist, for the longest time, I never even had the concept of that it will break down and be have a negative impact. But as you've been long enough, you go in your sump and it turns into clay, and you're like, whoa, what's going on there? So Aquachar is designed to make those carbon-carbon bonds, preserve that natural porosity, the vascular system of a tree, and maximizing that time and temperature so it doesn't leach anything to your system. So it can last for months after month after month and not have a negative impact.
So since you're burning wood and I'm assuming releasing smoke, what's the environmental impact of Aquachar?
So this is actually an interesting question. So when it comes to structured carbon, we actually use waste timber from like tree trimming companies and stuff like that. We actually have a tree trimming company at our production site that maintains our site, pre-sizes the wood for us to make Aquachar and everything, because of the fees we save them from running it to the dump, where it'll decompose, turn into methane, and eventually it's just going to go into the atmosphere and increase gases. One of the cool things is they've done studies with this in agriculture, adding it to soil and stuff like that. The first explorers, they called this soil terra preta, which is black earth, and they were amazed by its fertility. And basically what it does is because it becomes a microsite for bacteria in the soil. And they found in testing, all this time later, that stuff that was put 500 years ago into the soil, or maybe even longer than that, is pulling a centimeter of CO2 from the atmosphere.
Oh, nice.
So one of the cool things about Aquachar, and it's probably me for communicating this better, is even after it's done with your aquarium and everything like that, if you're using it for freshwater, you can keep the bacteria on it. But that regeneration process, you can use that to be able to use your old Aquachar in maybe a gardening project, add it to your soil. It increases aeration. It'll create those biological microsites. You can actually even soak it with vinegar to put on a consumable carbon to jumpstart that bacteria.
Oh, wow.
Which is another advantage of Aquachar, with its size and the use of hydroxides.
That is so cool. Okay, and so what about the release of smoke?
Yeah, so one of the interesting things about, you're sure there's some releasing of smoke in the atmosphere, but we actually recirculate the heat within our system. We use those gases that are released by the wood as in a recirculation system that actually helps fuel the fire. So activated carbon needs that external fuel source to keep and maintain the temperature of its industrialized process. We're actually a self-fueling process. So we're using chemistry and biology and engineering to be able to self-fuel what we're trying to the maximization and time of the temperature. So as we structure the carbon, it can hold on to that temperature and not break down. And that's what makes the Aquachar unique, is being able to get to that size. The larger size is by design, and it's unique to Aquachar because we are focusing with the batch process on the quality and consistency to get it to the temperature where it won't release those pre-tar smut resins and things like that. We're focusing on eliminating oxygen while increasing heat. So it's a very delicate balance that is manually monitored in our process.
The packaging is also environmentally friendly, right? With no plastics?
So one of the things we did was when we were designing our packaging, we used, a cardboard box. We didn't use BAP for our labeling, which when it's around aquariums is a risky thing, but we chose to make it biodegradable. So the other thing we use is the plastic comes with it, inside of it that contains the Aquachar is a plant-based plastic. It comes in a bag like this. The bag's decomposable and everything like that. That plays into our decision on not including a mesh bag. We do offer them on our website, just so people can make sure that they're running Aquachar the right way and everything like that. But most mesh bags work with moderate flow going through the system.
So, what is the best way to run Aquachar in a system?
There's a lot of ways to run Aquachar. So a lot of people ask me which is better, whether you put it in a reactor, because that's what people are accustomed to, whether you put it into a mesh bag, because that's easier and cheaper, obviously. And for me personally, I enjoy the mesh bags because it makes them eat. I'm lazy and I want to make maintenance as easy as possible. So, during a water change, I just shake it out, put it back in there, set it and forget it, and replace a little bit as I need it. I have plenty of customers that run it in a reactor and enjoy it because they can control the flow rate and feel like they can extend the life of Aquachar. It's really cool. I have a side-by-side on the website of activated carbon in a reactor and Aquachar in a reactor for the same amount of time, same feeding schedule. And one, you can, everyone knows this, you can see just the septic gunk that's built up on the activated carbon. It's sunk to the bottom. It's no longer fluidized, everything like that. And I explain to people turns into a septic zone in your system, which is not good. It promotes those bad bacteria for you. And then, you have a column with Aquachar, which is the larger size. It gives you, it allows the flow to go through the reactor, and it doesn't get clogged up. So I've seen a lot of customers that will use the reactor for their new Aquachar. And then when that's done, they'll move it to a mesh bag and their sump and use that as a biological media. They'll start pulling out their ceramic medias and stuff like that.
So could Aquachar be a replacement for all other biological media?
I have a lot of customers that will switch that out for their biological filtration.
Right.
Completely. They'll get rid of the ceramic bioblocks and everything like that because they love the convenience of being able to just pull it out with the water change, rinse it off. I've actually had customers that have cycled, I think it was a 130-gallon tank with Aquachar in 23 days because he was using it as a biological media.
Yeah, I think Patty from Her Nano Reefs talked about reseeding on Wine Wednesday.
Normally, I also use it for seeding other tanks. Like I keep the Aquachar there even after like months. And then if I'm, let's say, putting together a nano tank, I just grab the Aquachar and put it on like the sump or on the back chamber and help feeding my other tanks. So yeah, I do like Aquachar. I have used it and yeah.
Yeah, I think that's exactly why I got really interested is when you told me about it and you said that you actually use it as a means to start new tanks. I was like, oh, heck no. That's stuff because we talk about that all the time in Seahorse World here, having media ready to start a new tank, especially if you have little frylets come along or whatever. But yeah, so very cool. Seeding a tank is one thing, but are there any dangers to completely replacing biological media?
Well, the only downside to that is like, say you have a hair algae outbreak and you have to dose a medication or you have flatworms or something like that you have to eliminate from your system. You have to find an alternative method for your biological buildup if you have to pull your Aquachar. So like, that's the only disadvantage with the, and ceramic media works fine with that. You can find a balance with Aquachar and ceramic media to keep your system in balance. I've had customers and even aquaculture places I just dosed something for my hair algae. I forgot to turn off the reactor on the 4-month-old Aquachar, and guess what I still have? Hair algae. And I just dosed flatworm, and it was 5 months old, and I still have flatworms because I didn't pull that bag of Aquachar from my system. So,
which actually shows that the chemical properties are
But-
working many months longer than they should.
well,
but
and that's always my counter to that is think about how many times you just drop your hands in the tank because you see something you gotta do, or even candles in the house, air scents, everything like that that's in your house with it is going to interact with your water, just like CO2 and pH and everything like that. So what Aquachar offers is that buffer for that day-to-day, contaminants, even chemical warfare. One of our best some of our best customers are nano anemone tanks because they get so much chemical warfare. The chemical warfare has a half-life, but if that half-life happens on Aquachar, it could actually be broken down, and the anemones just look so much fluffier.
Some of us are finding some unique ways to run Aquachar, and I have some questions.
I showed you the way that I was using it in the 40. Now I've got it in a mesh bag in the sump in the 65, but in the 40, I'm using it in the little blue thing it's a blue sponge that goes into an internal filter, like an internal filter spray bar type thing. My question is, am I not getting as much benefit because the sponge is blocking things from getting to it? I mean, I know bacteria still can, it's tiny, but could that be a negative or a positive?
The reason I didn't tell you to not do it that way is because I'm really curious on that. I feel like having a mechanical filtration to pull the larger organics out allows those fine organics to get to Aquachar and not eliminate the reaction.
It might even make it more efficient and last longer because it's not being gunked up with the crap.
Correct.
And just stopping.
Yeah, and that's kind of that's where I was going with that. Is I think it might help with maintenance. I don't know if it'd be the primary way I'd run it, but it's one of those like I said, you might with the new stuff in there and take the old stuff and put it into a mesh bag and another thing.
And yeah, Joanne, I think I've mentioned before, the video coming out with on Pico and Bases, she literally uses Aquachar floating at the top of the tank, which probably isn't the most efficient way, but it's working for her, and it's. And
well, what's funny is people ask me about that. They're like, well, it's still floating after X amount of weeks. And I'm like, as it fills up with organics and bacteria, the bag will sink. You're extending the lifespan when it's in a bag because it will float originally. That'll stay above the water. It'll have minimum reaction. And as it sinks down, it's colonizing, so it kind of.
Right. No, and I just like it because it looks cute. And, it's still, like I said, it might not be the most efficient because it's not fully submerged at that point. But that to me just says that the tank's, not filled with organics, which is good. And also, I'm just saying it's still effective because it's still touching the water. It's still pulling stuff, just maybe.
Oh, yeah.
In, say, a macro or SPS tank, is there a danger of Aquachar removing too many nitrates, phosphates, or other elements?
There is a risk, and this is why I said, a lot of SPS dominant tanks and stuff like that, I recommend doing a half dose and building it up to find out what your system's balance is. Because, like I said earlier, when you quadruple your biological consumption in your system, and you keep your inputs the same, you can see some nitrates and phosphates dropping down lower than or stabilizing a little bit lower than what your inputs normally are. So my recommendation is always, check those things, make sure that you're not your biological consumption is not competing with your inputs are. And on the same side, one of the things that a lot of my customers with nano tanks love is they can feed their tanks like crazy and they're not worried about it, like their tanks skyrocketing and crashing. Right. Because the breakdown of those organics that they're feeding every day is going to a main source eventually. Aquachar is meant to pull those smaller fine, the oxidized outsides of those fine organics in the food and everything like that, and let the bigger stuff flow through, break down more, and then next time it sees it through, it'll take a little bit more off the outside of it. So it's not meant to completely strip your system, but every time it interacts with the water, it'll take a little bit more out of it. Aquachar is unique because it's both a chemical filtration and a biological filtration. So it's taking care of 2/3 of what you need to put in your filtration system. It's all about finding your balance with your system and what your inputs are and everything like that.
And when nutrient removal is the top goal, can it be used with other like GFO and activated carbon products?
You can consider activated carbon a complementary product to Aquachar, because if you're looking to strip something quickly and pull it out of your system, it's a good nutrient removal or organic removal method, especially for larger organics. So it can be used in conjunction with Aquachar.
So how does the integrated ceramic biomedia end up affecting pH? Because I've seen quite a few videos. I know that's not the major selling point of Aquachar.
Yeah.
What biological is, but I've just seen a lot of people who have had a positive experience with pH after using Aquachar. So how is that working?
Yeah, actually, so that's actually tied into what makes Aquachar different. So Aquachar is actually, activated carbon, people are familiar with, you add it to water and it bubbles up like it's a soda type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
That's because when in the final active quote unquote activation process, they attach oxygen to the outside. So when it's introduced to water again, it causes an oxygen reaction. That's where the quick lifespan of activated carbon comes through. We integrate the hydroxide aspect of ceramic biomedia. So hydroxides, they're OH negative, they have a negative charge. They will pull organics from the water, and that's how ceramic bioblocks pull the organics to feed the bacteria. What we do is we actually use the negative charge of the carbon to pull those organics to kind of more actively feed that side of it. So one of the cool things with attaching hydroxides with carbon is, rather than temporary increase in pH from the hydroxides, what carbon does is it creates a slow release mechanism. So it's kind of like an ion exchange with what it's taking in, and it'll slowly, I always tell people that it's not a buffer. It's not like you put it in, you'll see the next day your pH goes up. It has to kick in with your biological media, colonizing Aquachar, to be able to really do that exchange with the hydroxides to be able to build up in your system, where you'll see that jump of about, a lot of people see like about 0.2. It's great for people that are stuck in that 7, 8, 7, 9 range. Just would be so happy just get to go over 8.0 and just call it a day. Don't chase pH.
Seriously.
It's not the primary aspect of Aquachar, but it's one of those things that we've had enough people, even with blind reviews, that have said, I've seen this with Aquachar. I couldn't explain how it does it, but it does it. What it is it's a slow release of hydroxide into your system, the OH negatives, that creates the higher pH. And it's a balance with what's being biologically created in your system.
So long-term side perk. Got it.
One thing that people really like to see is case studies. Have there been any on Aquachar?
I just released a blog that kind of was going through two aspects of Aquachar that's kind of been case study tested, but it's by reputable companies. It's very hard with a unique product to find a quote unquote scientific test that we can release that won't be, frankly torn apart by the hobby. So we went with reputable companies that showed interest in Aquachar. They did their own testing and gave us the results. The first one was Triton Latin America. They were at MACNA 2019. So at MACNA 2019, we did 3,200 samples, kind of a talk of the show type of thing. It was in every single bag. But we had the guy that was running, Ruiz. He bought his own Aquachar to test in his own system. So one of the things that was interesting is I followed up with him a couple of months later, and what he had done was he'd run it on his own system. And the points that he said not only did Aquachar last longer than any activated carbon that he'd use, His exact words, and I love this, is he said, I would testify that with 230-day ICP analysis, that it doesn't leach anything. For RAP New York, one of our shows, we actually had a bacteriologist from Holland join our distributor from Holland to talk about Aquachar. He was very curious because he had talked about biochar, which is burnt wood, but it has a long time before it becomes biologically available. It doesn't work it's got that pre-smoke resin that will leach, and it's not good for a biological system, even a closed loop system like an aquarium.
So he wanted to know how you were doing it.
No, so he was actually curious as a biomedia, can we become a biomedia instantly when put in the or quickly when put in the aquarium? Because he does a lot of aquaculture projects and stuff like that. So he did an 8-month study where he did Aquachar. He added X amount of Aquachar, ran it, then he took a couple weeks off where he didn't feed it because he wanted to see whether the Aquachar was food source or if it was pulling in the organics and that was the food source. Then about 4 months in, he added new bacteria to it. Actually, it was about 3 months in, he added new bacteria to it, and then 6 months he ran it by adding new bacteria, but inconsistently feeding. So the cool thing that came from this is, the first thing is he had like 1/10 to the 7th bacteria. If you want more information, you can look at it. But
Right.
So he found that it quadrupled the first 3 months. Then when he stopped feeding, he saw it go down because there was no food source for the Aquachar to attract the bacteria. So he found that regular dosing of bacteria in any system, and I encourage this too. Find the bacteria that work for you and redose it on a quarterly, biannually basis. It's good husbandry. It increases diversity, everything like that. So then the other thing, that once he added new bacteria for the last 6 months, he found that it stayed at that 4 times level as long as he would kept the inputs consistent, which tells a lot for a system, because I know a lot of people try to chase nutrients and try to reduce them by reducing your feeding, and don't really put the connection with how that does with your biological consumption. So a lot of times I see people will do that, and then all of a sudden they get hair allergy, then they got cyano, and then they got dinos type of thing. So it's a chain of events, and when people don't act too hasty with it and try to build stability versus the dose in a bottle, that's where Aquachar is trying to go.
To learn more about Aquachar, watch the previous Wine Wednesday episode and check out their website. Both links can be found in the description. And when you're ready to order Aquachar, be sure to use the Seahorse Whisperer code to get 15% off your first order. Thank you so much for watching the video, and be sure to subscribe to the channel to catch all of our new and awesome videos. I second-guessed myself and added too much bacteria to the new seahorse tank. While it isn't hurting the seahorses, I could barely see them. After adding the Aquachar in the sponge filter that I described earlier, the tank was cleared in 24 hours. I'll provide future updates, but I'm very happy so far with Aquachar. And I'm going to go ahead and say the seahorses are too.